The boot was always kept in the same place, at the foot of the bed, slightly tilted to the right, its dark leather well polished, and the tall shaft marked by constant use. To the lord of the estate, that boot was not just an object, it was a habit, a silent symbol of authority. Putting it on every morning was the first act of control of the day, a physical reminder that the land, the fields, and the people all began there. That morning, however, something different was breathing inside it. The Ashcroft estate was old, not in a romantic sense, but in the harsh way time bears down. Thick walls, cold corridors, narrow windows, a place built to outlast the people who lived in it. The lord of the estate took pride in that. He liked to say his family had ruled there for generations, and that nothing changed without his permission. Among the many women who served the mansion, there was one who was rarely noticed, Margaret. She was known simply as the cleaning girl, small, quiet, always with her head lowered. She tended to the rooms, the fires, the boots, the clothes, invisible tasks done so that others would never have to think about them. The lord of the estate did not know her name. He did not care. The afternoon before, Margaret had been summoned to the study, not for a mistake, but for convenience. A glass knocked over by another maid, a delay that was not hers. Still, she was the one who received the punishment. It was not violent. It did not need to be. Public humiliation was enough. The blunt accusation, the tone of contempt. To him, it was discipline. To her, it was a cruel reminder that her existence was disposable. Margaret left the study with her face burning and her body stiff. She did not cry. She did not shout. She had learned long ago that reactions attracted attention, and attention was costly. That night, while cleaning the outer corridor near the gardens, she heard the sound. A faint dragging between the stones, a movement that did not match the wind or the rats. Margaret stopped, crouched, watched. Among the low plants, something moved calmly, like a creature well acquainted with its own territory. It was an adder. It was not large nor aggressive, but it was known. Even the most arrogant men respected it. Its venom did not kill quickly, but it made one suffer. Pain, fever, swelling. A slow consequence. Margaret watched the animal for several long seconds. Not with fear, with attention. She had grown up in the countryside. She knew how to deal with the land and with what crawled upon it. She knew when to act and when to wait. The snake did not see her as a threat. It was merely passing through. That night, Margaret barely slept. The next morning the ritual began as it always did. The lord of the estate rose early. Breakfast was served. Orders were given. Margaret was tasked with preparing the bedroom and laying out the clothes for the day. Among them, the boots. She picked up the first, heavy, familiar. The second, she hesitated. The adder was there, coiled at the bottom of the leather, still cold, perfectly fitted to that narrow space. It had not been placed there by chance. Margaret could not have explained how, but she felt the moment had chosen itself. She did not scream. She did not drop the boot. She simply took a deep breath. With slow, careful movements, she pushed the animal further inside, using a thick cloth. The snake reacted but did not strike. The confined space kept it contained. The boot was placed exactly where it had always been. The routine did not change. The lord of the estate finished breakfast, stood up, and entered the bedroom. Margaret had already left. Silence settled back into the room. He sat on the bed, picked up the right boot, and put it on without looking. Then the left. The leather tightened. The movement was almost elegant, automatic, and then the pain exploded. There was no immediate scream, just a short, choked sound, as if the body were trying to understand what was happening. His foot burned. The pressure increased. He tore the boot off and hurled it against the wall. The snake fell onto the rug, exposed, agitated. The room dissolved into chaos. Servants ran. Cries echoed through the corridors. The overseer burst in armed. The animal was killed on the spot, crushed without ceremony. A doctor was summoned in haste. The lord of the estate's foot swelled rapidly. The pain was constant, deep, not the kind of suffering that can be resolved with orders. Margaret watched everything from the corridor, invisible as always. The doctor was clear. The venom was not fatal, but it demanded absolute rest. Days without walking, without riding, without inspecting the fields. Power, accustomed to moving freely, was confined to a chair. The estate felt the change immediately. Without the lord of the estate present, decisions were delayed. The overseer tried to compensate with severity, but failed. Workers complained. Small conflicts arose. Nothing serious. Just enough to show that control was not as solid as it appeared, and no one ever asked how the snake had ended up there. Margaret continued working, cleaning, watching, in silence, because sometimes justice does not arrive shouting. It hides where no one looks, waits for the automatic gesture, and acts at the exact moment power believes itself to be safe. The swelling did not subside in the days that followed. On the contrary, the lord of the estate's foot took on a purplish hue that the doctor did not like to look at for long. The pain came in deep waves, as if something was still alive inside it, constantly reminding him of the mistake of trusting an automatic gesture. He remained confined to the smaller bedroom of the mansion, far from the window that overlooked the fields. The boot, now unusable, had been thrown away along with the crushed body of the snake. The incident began to be treated as bad luck, a rare accident, something that could happen to anyone. That was how the overseer explained it to the curious. But bad luck comes at a cost. With the lord of the estate no longer walking the fields, the days lost the rigid rhythm that sustained the property's artificial order. The overseer tried to maintain control, but he lacked the same quiet authority. His voice had to be raised. His punishments became more frequent. That bred tension, and tension breeds mistakes. Margaret watched. She went on cleaning corridors, changing bed linen, picking up objects that fell to the floor. No one suspected her. In the eyes of the house, she remained too small to cause anything, too invisible to be remembered, but the lord of the estate remembered. At night, he woke drenched in sweat, his heart racing. He relived the moment he had felt the sting, the leather tightening, the sudden pain. He began to distrust his own belongings. He asked others to check his shoes, his clothes, his sheets. Control was slowly turning into paranoia. The doctor returned several times. He advised prolonged rest, spoke of the risk of infection, of the need to avoid strain. Every word sounded like a sentence. A man accustomed to ruling the land now depended on others just to cross a corridor. Rumors began to circulate. They were not direct accusations. They were whispers. Workers talked about the snake, about how unlikely it was for such an animal to crawl into a boot on its own. The overseer tried to silence the talk, but the louder he shouted, the further it spread. The lord of the estate's authority was not collapsing in a grand scandal. It was wearing away slowly, like old leather. A few weeks later, an unexpected visitor arrived at the property. A local official sent to review records and general conditions after minor complaints accumulated over the years. Nothing serious on its own, but enough to justify an inspection. The lord of the estate could not receive him standing. Seated with his foot raised, he looked smaller, older. The visitor noticed immediately. He asked simple questions, observed the surroundings, noted the owner's absence from the fields, noted the overseer's nervousness, and he took notes. The inspection revealed delays, neglect, failures of supervision, nothing that would destroy an estate overnight, but enough to stain the reputation of a man who had always prided himself on absolute control. The snake was not mentioned in the reports. It did not need to be. It had already served its purpose. In time, the lord of the estate walked again, but never quite the same. His foot ached on cold days. He limped subtly, avoided tall boots, avoided certain rituals. The automatic gesture that once defined his mornings had been broken, and something else had changed. He began to watch the servants with suspicion, not because he knew who was responsible, but because he had understood, too late, that danger does not always come from outside. Sometimes it lives within routine itself. Margaret stayed on for a while longer. Then her name vanished from the records. No one could say whether she was sold, transferred, or simply left when vigilance weakened. Stories like that are rarely written down. What remained was the effect. The estate never fully recovered its former rhythm. The overseer was replaced months later. Part of the land was leased out. Power remained, but it was no longer absolute. It bore a scar. And it had all begun with something small, a discrete animal, an everyday object, a gesture repeated daily without thought, because justice, when it arrives in silence, does not need to shout. It simply hides where no one looks, waits for habit, and acts at the exact moment power believes itself to be safe. And when that happens, there is no authority capable of stopping the consequence. If you made it this far, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Stay with us. The next story is already appearing on your screen.